300 years ago, the founder of the ancient assembly whispered in a voice that everyone could hear and said that for the establishment of the temple and the imposition of a unified system, there must be 3 world wars. He said it exactly like that. However, the people of the past, like the people of today, only see events after the fact. Those who see light in the darkness know that the direct goal of igniting the First World War was to destroy the 4 imperial powers: the German, Austro-Hungarian, Slavic Bolshevik, and finally the Islamic Ottoman, for the establishment of the Illuminato rule and its imposition on the world under the British-American umbrella. It is also known that the goal of igniting the Second World War was to appease and weaken Europe and the Soviet Union, and to establish the strongest pole that would rule the world with iron and fire. Today, after Uncle Sam's empire is on the verge of collapse due to debt and internal division, and with the rising power in the East, it was necessary to dust off the past scenario with the present pen and reignite the Great War. Why does China want to regain Taiwan 70 years after its independence? This is a question that everyone asks. But the more accurate question is, how did America make Taiwan the direct outlet for China's salvation? And what is the real goal of fattening Taiwan before presenting it as a sacrifice for war bills? What is the goal behind spreading discord and conflicts between neighboring countries, even though the fire will burn everyone? We will present a sequential analysis of the facts in order to connect the events and know the details of the most dangerous Chinese-American game that will precede the Great War and enter the world into a deep tunnel. To deeply understand the current situation, we must first understand Uncle Sam's political leanings towards wars. Despite the fact that the United States of America has been around for about 250 years, it has spent 222 years in wars, now exceeding 93 wars. The primary political direction of the United States empire is war, for 4 main objectives that do not change: expansion, economy represented by resources and debt relief, and finally weakening competition. After the United States rose to power, it adopted a single style of war policy, fighting from behind walls. In the First World War, it entered in the last months, but it reaped all the spoils. In the Second World War, Europe and the Soviet Union were at the forefront, and it was in the back seat, yet it was the real winner and dominated the world. In the few times that it felt able to move with its army, it suffered very large losses and defeats in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and finally Iraq, which it only entered after destroying its military arsenal. With that, it was not able to occupy it by its own strength, but by the acts of betrayal. In this page of history, we see clearly that the empire's second political direction in wars relies on proxy wars until the enemy is exhausted, until a direct entrance to avoid the experience of Vietnam and Afghanistan. As for the third and most dangerous direction, it is sowing discord and igniting wars between neighboring countries, achieving absolute sovereignty and weakening direct and potential adversaries. In the last century, it supported South Korea at the expense of the North, and at the same time gave the green light to communism to arm itself in order to ignite tension between them, and also sow the tension hotspot between India and Pakistan on the Kashmir region, and supported India at the expense of Pakistan. In 1979, it supported jihadists to fight the Soviet Union with the lives of Islamists and get rid of both of them. After 10 years, it succeeded in overthrowing the Soviet Union and waged a comprehensive war against the Mujahideen, who had a direct role in overthrowing it. The war continued against Islam until 2008, when the American budget reached deficit, and the global economic crisis had to be ignited to get rid of the deficit and debt. During its shameful war on Islam, it gave a golden opportunity for a great power to emerge in the East under the banner of China and Russia, and the global economy turned into the Red Army. Due to the global economic crisis, that it caused in 2008, China and Russia knew that America was about to collapse and wanted to get rid of the great economic and military power, just like in the Second World War, which would give them a new lung to breathe. However, China and Russia played a different role this time, and America did not expect the game they played. After the United States caused the global economic crisis in 2008, China and Russia established a global organization called BRICS, aimed at establishing a bipolar world order led by each of them. This step will be one of the causes of the Third World War, which its first spark was ignited in that year, 14 years ago. The first high-level meeting of BRICS leaders was held in July 2008 on Hokkaido Island, Japan, where the G8 summit was held and Brazil, India, and South Africa later joined. Today, Russia is seeking to persuade Saudi Arabia and Egypt to join that organization as well. But this will not happen before the collapse of America. Creating this organization was a warning signal to the US administration, as it includes 40% of the world's population, and it is expected to control the global economy with an iron fist. Therefore, America changed its military strategy from the war on Islam to the war on the BRICS leaders Russia and China in 2010. Uncle Sam started to stir things up, and protests broke out in Ukraine demanding independence and sovereignty. Those events continued for 4 years between escalation and tension until 2014, when the former Ukrainian president, loyal to the Russian leadership, was removed and a new president of Jewish origin, Volodymyr Zelensky, was appointed. The second game then began, with NATO forces surrounding Russia and announcing their intention to join Ukraine to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Russia has been cautious during this time, fearing the expansion of NATO, especially as it included all former Soviet countries except Ukraine. In 2020, the Minsk speech further escalated tensions with Russia, until a proposal was made to annex Ukraine to the Western Alliance, and Russia became besieged by NATO forces. The direct goal of these escalations was to drag Russia towards the Ukrainian swamp. When the war began, military aid and heavy weapons poured into Ukraine without Europe realizing that America had involved them in a war they could not escape. Today, the world is witnessing the Russian gas cut off from Europe and its entry into the Dark Age soon. But Uncle Sam has achieved 2 goals at once: drowning the Russians and weakening Europe to accelerate the pace of destroying the old system, which we will explain the dangerous goal of later in this documentary. Now the stage is set to move towards China, its economic competitor and its biggest nightmare. What you are about to reveal shows that the plan to overthrow Russian and Chinese power was written on one page and using the same scenario. In the year 2016, 2 years after the overthrow of the former Ukrainian president, it was realized how one factory can affect everything in your modern life. You must understand the diversity of the products it produces. It produces 11,600 products that are used in the manufacturing of all the technologies you see around you, from phone chips to advanced weapon chips and airplane engines. The Taiwanese semiconductor factory, known as TSMC, dominates 54% of the world's electronics chip production, contributing to raising the country's gross domestic product, GDP, to $800 billion in 2020, whereas in the 1970s it did not exceed only $15 billion. Do you imagine the amount of money and technological progress that China will gain from taking over Taiwan? Now you understand why China is concerned with acquiring Taiwan, because this factory is invaluable and China does not have the technology it possesses, as it has been able to produce chips with a standard of just 5 nanometers. The United States issued instructions to Taiwan to dismantle the factory and transfer it to America, which will be disastrous for Taiwan as this factory is its only guarantee for American support. The American government passed a law for building a Taiwanese electronic chip factory on US soil, which raised the stakes for China. China attempted to solve the problem diplomatically, but failed, and its only option left is to annex Taiwan. China has started to launch military threats to annex Taiwan forcibly. Its allies Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and Singapore back Taiwan and have become like a wall that surrounds China. If China tries to annex Taiwan, it will be a major blow to it. Therefore, China resorts to economic warfare against America, using the pandemic and imposing a blockade on Taiwan. The United States knows that China is about to make a move towards its goal, and even if it does not, sanctions and blockades are imposed on it from all directions. However, the Chinese are also skilled at playing this game. It cannot be ignored that China controls goods around the world, and it will use this economic power against Americans, pressuring the American economy on one hand and surrounding Taiwan on the other. Taiwan hangs by a delicate thread that could snap at any moment, and here Uncle Sam takes the bigger and more dangerous step. Weeks ago, the third most powerful person in America and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced her intention to visit Taiwan. The visit was justified as a way to support and stand with America's allies, but the U.S. Defense Department requested that she cancel the visit following threats from China to shoot down the plane. The aim of announcing the visit and subsequently cancelling it was to give China a green light towards moving towards Taiwan. However, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman stated that China is trying to impose peaceful solutions with Taiwan first, and the Americans learned that China understands the American game like never before. Pelosi affirmed her visit to Taiwan with two goals: to slap China in front of the world and show it in a defeated position, especially in front of its people, and to provoke China insanely and impose American sovereignty. America knows that China would never dare to shoot down an American plane, and if it did, it would provide the world with full justification for destroying it. In early August, Pelosi's plane headed towards Taiwan and the visit took place, and China appeared weak and defeated in the face of American dominance. Therefore, it has no choice but to begin live military maneuvers and surround Taiwan, as its entry will achieve American goals. However, if it imposes a blockade on Taiwan, it will also give Americans a justification to intervene in order to break the siege of its allies, dragging it towards war, as it did with Russia. This leads to the question on which political analyses should be based. Why is Uncle Sam seeking to ignite the Great War again, even though the fires of war may burn everyone without exception? There is a clear intention to ignite the fire of war in the world. If we look at events quickly, we will find an increase in conflicts between Iran and the Arab Gulf, and indirect support for Iran to control other Arab countries after Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. On the other hand, tensions have returned between India and Pakistan after India entered the BRICS organization and Pakistan rebelled against Americans. On the Nile Basin, a very dangerous plan is being implemented through the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, especially after reaching the third filling, which means either a certain drought for the Nile countries or the destruction of the dam and the occurrence of floods. On the Korean Peninsula, the situation is not the best, as the leader of North Korea prepares to annex the South like its neighbors Russia and China. On the other side of Europe, and just a few days after the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to Kosovo, the situation between Kosovo and Serbia has escalated into military clashes, threatening a new war in Europe. Azerbaijan, on the other hand, transports heavy weapons again to its borders, and a new crisis may erupt in the coming days. We are living in days when the world is boiling and erupting. China warned America yesterday not to play with fire because it would burn everyone, so the world's countries are disturbed and ready for the Great War, and the conflict is now on the doorstep. One might ask in this situation and say that the United States of America built this system, called the New World Order, as part of globalization centered around it. Therefore, according to theory, if this system collapses, The United States would be the biggest loser, so why did it not destroy it? The truth that must be understood well is that this system has aged and is no longer profitable for the United States of America, as it has become directly responsible for its losses. Indeed, its collapse is imminent. It will cause greater losses on Uncle Sam's country, but it must be done in such a way that other countries lose more than the United States itself, as happened in the Second World War when it dominated the world for 70 years. Let me share with you the facts recognized by the economic figures of America itself since the mid-70s of the last century. America consumes more than it produces, and its external trade deficit is growing. Where other countries began to feed, clothe the USA, and refuel their cars. A questioner may ask, how is that? The simple answer: America has the largest reserves of oil, gold, and dollars in the world, and also dominates the rest of the countries, and the prevailing law is to serve the weak and the strong. However, at that time, the US central bank broke the dollar's peg to gold and began printing paper dollars based on petrodollars to buy goods and raw materials from other countries around the world, and later developed to print uncoated paper money as a source of hidden wealth in the US currency, while the external debt was constantly increasing. With the growth of the debt pyramid, the economy became in danger, and the printing of uncoated paper money also increased until the year 2008 came and the economic crisis flared up in the world. This step helped her to delay the collapse of the dollar, but introduced her into other trade and economic whirlpools, especially with China. 10 years ago, the US trade deficit with China amounted to $250 billion US, but today it has reached $450 billion US, and here the printing of US federal money no longer serves the United States, but serves China. Because of this uncovered money, global inflation has increased significantly, especially since the summer of 2020. According to the commandments of the Rome Forum in the year 1961 for a billion people, it contributed more to accelerating the pace of its economic collapse, and the Western economy in the Corona Theater entered a recession. And in order to get out of that crisis, it is necessary to print twice as much money as is being printed now, which means that inflation will increase exponentially. Haven't you asked yourself why the anti-epidemic measures were terminated around the world and allowed to return to stadiums, lounges, cafes, and amusements, although the numbers of infected people, according to their description, are constantly doubling, because this game has become a burning fire that consumed the economy, and the dollar is actually at stake. So the magic turned on the magician, and the United States of America is suffering from a huge budget deficit with a trade deficit as well, and there are not enough funds to cover it, which portends the disintegration of the American economy. Uncle Sam's country had to turn to the sacrificial policy of its allies as the only way to postpone the collapse for a longer period by plunging the world into creative chaos, so that capital from all over the world would flee to the United States as a last resort for their money. And on the other hand, get rid. The euro is collapsing against the dollar after Europe's involvement against Russia by inflaming tensions over the years, to which more than $1 trillion have flowed from the owners of funds in Asia, Europe, and the Arab countries. The demand for the US dollar has increased crazily in the sequence of the collapse of the banknotes of countries, and this clearly shows us that the collapse of the world economy has become very imminent, similar to the year 2008. But the United States of America has a chance to survive by destroying all alternative power centers and major economies, hoping that this attempt will give it a chance to start the second hegemony as happened in World War II. What Uncle Sam is playing is very dangerous, and it may ignite fires that we have not seen in previous wars. I don't think America will survive this time. The realities today are different, and the states are more powerful. The economy is at stake. Nevertheless, we see from a personal point of view that these great events represent a hard and difficult labor for Islamic countries, but they will eventually lead to the rebirth of the Son of Islam. In conclusion, always remember that there are not only friends in politics. Interests meet today and conflict tomorrow. Do not be a party to the clash of the poles, and do not be every pawn on the chessboard sacrificed to you in order to achieve the plans of the players. And I know that siding with the Chinese-Russian alliance, as simple people do, or to the American-Western alliance, is a certain stupidity. The victor of them always seeks to kill you, as it happened, and happens every time. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below on what you liked about it. Also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel for more content like this. We really appreciate your support, and it helps us create better videos for you. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload from us. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.